I made comments earlier during this podcast that definitely went out over air. If I have hurt anyone out there, please suck it up. I pride myself and think of myself as a man of faith. And there's a drive into Philadelphia by Castellanos. That'll be a new contract. And so it'll be a 5-year deal. I know I'm going to be putting on this headset again. I know it'll be for the Slumpbuster. Castellanos memes aside, Kyle, Nick Castellanos is now a Philadelphia Philly. Trevor Story is the big story in Boston. And Carlos Correa is going to be taking the trash can up to the Twin Cities. What move from this week will pay the biggest dividends, Mr. Ledbetter?
I really hope that people understood that joke because it was really nuanced and really baseball, but really good. And there's a deep drive to left field by Castellanos. Do any of those moves, I guess Trevor Story goes to a contender, but I don't think of Philadelphia as a contender at this point. And I don't know if Castellanos moves the needle for them in that way, although good for him for getting $100 million.
From what a lot of people are saying, mostly when you think about the Phillies, is their offense is going to be designed to put up 10 to 15 runs. But the problem is they don't have a pitching staff that's going to keep that run total below that 10 to 15 run threshold. So they're going to be in a lot of shootouts this year. They're going to be in a lot of back and forth games. They're trying to just outscore every opponent. And while I like the strategy, while like a dynamic offense in baseball, the death lineup that they're building out there, we haven't seen a lot of success with that really working out. At least in my history, at least in my lifetime, I have not seen a lot of teams go for that strategy. And it just seems a little bit inorganic in the same way you look at the Dodgers and their lineup. And while their lineup is truly a death lineup, it's all homegrown. The Phillies are doing it in a much different way. And I just kind of don't like it. I mean, again, Castellanos, fine piece. We're talking about a guy that finished 12th in MVP voting. We're talking about a guy that was an all-star, a silver slugger, but you're right. I don't know if this is necessarily the move. They also added Kyle Schwarber this year too. So that's another piece that the Phillies are doing. They're trying to build a good lineup this year.
That was the thing I was about to say. They're trying to do a death lineup, but is the lineup actually that good? I'm trying to go through it in my head. So obviously they have Gene Segura, they have Castellanos, they've got Schwarber, they've got Bryce Harper, who is obviously the MVP, but we know Bryce Harper fluctuates a lot in between seasons, but maybe they'll get the best of the best Bryce Harper. And I guess Real Muto is still there. So I guess that's pretty good. Didi Gregorius will be a DH unless, Schwarber's a DH.
Again, the problem is start listing off their pitching staff. It's not good, man.
I mean, Aaron Nola is pretty good, but you're right. It's, oh God, Kyle Gibbs. Oh God. Oh, it's bad. Oh no. Kyle Gibson is their number 2. That's terrible.
It's not just there. It's not just that they have a bad pitching staff. They also have a bad defensive lineup. Well, all these guys can hit. They're not great fielders.
That's why
probably going to be a DH, but even got the best of them, like Bryce Harper is kind of declined in terms of his fielding in recent years. Gene Segura is not much of a defensive shortstop either. Or
that's why I was saying the Phillies don't feel like a contender. The original question was which of these is the most. I guess Story to Boston matters a lot. I guess that's a big deal move because Boston did really need to get a shortstop / second baseman to fill in there. So I guess that one does actually make a pretty big difference. I know Story's probably going to play second base because Xander Bogaerts, but I guess that one makes a bit of a difference. Correa is so strange.
Yeah, Correa, that one I think is the most interesting from the standpoint of the Twins. The Twins, I didn't think were really trying to do much this year. And they got Gary Sanchez. So their offense, they're trying to build a bit of an offense together themselves. They're not building quite the death lineup that the Phillies are building, but they're trying to build a nice little offensive unit that, again, also suffers defensively. And the Twins at least benefit from being in a wide open AL Central.
I think the division that I wish to disband. Yes,
the White Sox, I think, are still my favorites, but the Twins, you get a guy like Correa, you get a guy like Sanchez. I think they've also made a couple smaller acquisitions before and after the MLB lockout. They're going to try and compete to win their division. Obviously, we get expanded playoffs this year. If you told me the Twins were a fringe playoff team, one of those surprise stories this year, I'd believe you. I think that they're making the moves to be that. Trevor Story, I will add on to what you're saying, though. What I'm going to be most intrigued with Trevor Story is he's one of those Colorado guys, right? He's one of those guys that has home road splits. In fact, his home and away numbers, he is a 300 hitter at Coors. Away from Coors, he's a 241 hitter. His slugging percentage, almost 150 points below average when you consider his home road splits. And I will concede that the AL East does have some hitter-friendly ballparks, but you're not going to find anything as good as hitting at Coors. At least, if you're talking advanced metrics, his BABIP, So his batting average of balls in play, he is a 300 hitter in both categories. So maybe that's going to be more predictive of success. It just, we kind of talk about this anytime you talk about a guy leaving Colorado. Is he going to be closer to Arenado or is he going to be closer to Troy Tulowitzki? Where is he going to fall in that?
Well, yeah, but it's better than like Christian Arroyo, who I think is their starter at this point. So like that was kind of the big thing, was like they had a huge need at second base. Sorry, Kike. I know Kike is kind of a utility guy, but
one of the big parts of their playoff run was offense, right? They were an offensive driven team. In fact, when the Astros went against them, their back end of their rotation was never going to stop the Astros lineup, and it didn't. And the only reason the Astros ended up losing the World Series last year, and that also goes into Carlos Correa, I think he slumped in the World Series last year, but the Astros faced their best pitching staff in the Atlanta Braves. The Boston Red Sox weren't that, and the Boston Red Sox came out of nowhere in the playoffs. Have they fixed their needs? Is Trevor Story really the difference between them being a team that slipped into the playoffs and made a run to the ALCS and a team that back to competing for a World Series out of the AL?
Well, no, but one player can't do, like Mike Trout can't change that for any single team. So like, it's just better than, I guess, the alternative for Boston, which is, they were going to kind of have that little bottom of the order interchangeable piece between Kike and, maybe Bobby Dahlbeck, who had that one amazing month and then like kind of fell out of the lineup at the end. So I don't know, like Boston's kind of in this weird place that way. The Twins one is funny. And I did want to talk about that here, which is Minnesota decided that we aren't good enough to win a World Series, but we also don't want to tear it down and start all over again. And that's probably a good idea, because as bad as Minnesota was last year, like the AL Central is just putrid. Like Kansas City's waiting for all the prospects to come up. The Tigers are getting better, presumably at this point. And Cleveland is now in the crapper trying to tank for the top pick. So I understand that point from Minnesota, which is we can get to the playoffs just by trying in Major League Baseball. You're already like the 8th best team in your league. Like just by actually giving a shit, you already become the 8th best team in your league, because the Rangers are going to, I know the Rangers are trying to win, but they're not going to be good enough. Seattle's not going to, Oakland's not going to try and win. Seattle's now trying to win. I'm just so used to saying Seattle's not trying to win, but Oakland's going to stink. Texas is going to stink. The Tigers are still going to stink, even though they're going to be better. They're still going to stink. The Royals are going to stink. Cleveland is going to stink, and Baltimore is going to stink. Yeah, I mean, it gets you into the conversation, which baseball can be weird sometimes. Like if you catch a hot streak, you can turn something around, and Gary Sanchez makes you a better team, and Giovanni Urshela is worse than Donaldson, but not by much. Like Giovanni Urshela was really good in those few years with the Yankees, and they've re-signed Byron Buxton. They tried to trade him at the deadline. Then they decided to give him an extension. So I think that was kind of the turning point for the Twins, was when they couldn't get what they wanted for Buxton. That's when they kind of pivoted and said, we're going to try and do really, really well at this point, even though they traded Jose Barrios at the deadline last year. But that was just because he was going to be a free agent at the end of the year.
They went out there and acquired Sonny Gray. That was another move that I noticed from their free agent tracker. And Sonny Gray, he's such an interesting pitcher. Every time I think he's done and ready to be out of the league, he comes back and has a practically all-star season. So I never completely downplay Sonny Gray. He still has some stuff. He still has obviously some talent to keep around. But then you look at other guys on there, guys like Dylan Bundy. I don't know. Again, you're right. They're probably just happy to be in the middle. If they win the AL Central, cool. And if you're a fan and you get to sell some tickets off Carlos Correa jerseys and Carlos Correa being your new shortstop, that's fine. A big thing about Carlos Correa getting this contract, which is interesting, a 3-year deal, $105 million, so short-term contract. And Carlos Correa is good. I think Carlos Correa is good. And I think he's one of my favorite players that's never been a San Francisco Giant, even though, damn it, Carlos, you should have been. You should have been a San Francisco Giant this year, but
no, they got Brandon Crawford, 36-year-old Brandon Crawford.
Whoa. Second base, people move around. You talk about Trevor Story moving positions. He could have been our second baseman. That's fine.
Carlos Correa is going to be second base over Brandon Crawford. Get out of here.
No, Brandon Crawford's our shortstop.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say.
Brandon Crawford's our shortstop. Carlos Correa to second. I could have lived with it.
Brandon Crawford's moving to second base in that situation.
No. Brandon
it's Carlos Correa.
Brandon Crawford is a magician. He is sensational. And have you seen that long hair flowing in the wind when he goes on a dive? It's like a gazelle just going through the safari.
I don't understand how any of that happened last year. I've said it so many times. I don't understand how Brandon Crawford and Brandon Belt, who have been Giants since I was born in 2001, somehow just miraculously at 58 and 52 years old, miraculously turned their careers around.
MVP.
Throw Longo in the mix too. That didn't make any sense either. But anyways,
Longo, should be long gone. Carlos
Correa.
Yes.
Finishing
the point here. One thing that concerns me and should concern the Twins, Carlos Correa in 3 of the last 4 non-60 game seasons has missed over 50 games. So he's not exactly a model of health. So the fact that he didn't go for a more long-term contract is interesting for him. I wonder if anyone was offering him that 6-year to 10-year deal and why Scott Boras decided to settle on this 3-year contract. I know there's opt-outs. I know there's some weird inner workings. The fact that your player, your representative, doesn't have a clean bill of health on a year-to-year basis, those are usually the guys that seek the more long-term deals. Those are the guys that usually are happy to still get paid $30 million a year in their age 38 season while also missing the majority of games. And the fact that Carlos Correa settled on a somewhat bet on yourself 3-year deal surprised me.
Well, so this is the effects of the MLB's salary cap. And I put salary cap in air quotes because it's a competitive balance luxury tax that essentially acts as a salary cap, is that the teams that spent on free agents were teams 10 through 20 this year. In baseball, it's more like teams 8 to 16 because half the teams in baseball are tanking. But, teams 10 to 20 were the ones who spent on free agents because the Yankees were out of the game. Well, the Red Sox were out of the game until they got Trevor Story, but the Cubs were essentially out of the game. The Nationals were out of the game in free agents. The Padres were out of the game in free agents, which it's weird to talk about the Padres as a big market team now, but it makes me feel good to say it. The Giants were out on Chris Bryant, even though Chris Bryant signed for like $30 million a year or something like that.
And that too, tying Chris Bryant into Carlos Correa, 2 Scott Boras clients that signed with teams that we don't think as contenders. I thought both those guys would be more in trying to build out their legacy in their latter half of their career, but kind of, I feel settled for these mid-tier teams that I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel for the Twins or Rockies.
Well, yeah, but this is about getting them to competitive. So I think this is more long-term for the Twins. Because if I say the name Royce Lewis, do you know who I'm talking about?
I can see if Google knows who you're talking about.
Oh, darn. Well, that defeats my point. But Royce Lewis is like a name that Twins fans know because he was the number 1 pick in the draft in 2017. And he's been coming up slowly but steadily, but he's a top 30 prospect instead of a top prospect as the number 1 pick in the draft. But they went through this process already. They went through the process of tearing it to the ground. They went through the process of being terrible. And so fans are going to invest in the players that are there and invest in the storylines. And yeah, maybe that'll get them a missed playoff spot this year, but they're hoping that if Royce Lewis comes up through the system, or if Gregory Polanco becomes the player they were hoping for him to be, or Luis Arias turns into something, or Max Kepler becomes a perennial all-star, they're hoping that will then put them over the edge. All they're doing now is creating the supporting cast the same way Toronto did last offseason when they signed George Springer. I know the parallels of Springer and Correa are such, but it feels like they're following where Toronto was, which is we're about 2 years away. We're waiting for the White Sox to kind of hit the clapper a little bit, but we're 2 years away. And so now we're supplementing our team now for a push in 2023, which the alternative was they could have torn it all to the ground and tried again. But they're saying we're going to play the 2-year game of just trying to get into the playoffs. And maybe at that 2023 deadline, we can trade for a bunch of people and we can try and make a push for the World Series because baseball playoffs are random. This seems to be kind of the place that they're in right now, which is we don't have the money to compete with these teams, but we have just enough good players to get in the mix. It's not like they're 100% good to go. Like we said, they're probably the 6th or 7th best team in the American League, but they're at least setting themselves up to try and go after a pretty shitty AL Central title. And that'll be easier for fans to invest in because at least it's going to be the same team for the next 3 years. At least it's still going to be the names they know and the names they've been rooting for the last couple of years. It's still going to be Buxton, still going to be Polanco, still going to be Miguel Sano, still going to be those guys, even if they kind of had to retool a little bit over the last couple of years. Even if it ends with the Twins getting swept in the first round like they always do, at least they're trying to get back there instead of saying, let's wait 6 years to get swept in the first round. Let's try and get swept in the first round right now.
Anytime the Twins make it to the postseason, it comes down to, are we going to have to head to New York? Are we going to get swept? Probably likely.